"You're the reason this family has problems," my parents announced at dinner. Everyone nodded. I nodded too. Then I became the reason they had housing problems, by stopping the rent payments. Sometimes being the problem is actually the solution. Can you believe your own family, the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, would sit you down and tell you, to your face, that you are the problem? That's exactly what happened to me, and what came next was a cold, calculated plan for their comeuppance that still haunts me. So, picture this. I was 29 years old, sitting at my parents' dining table. That same colossal oak table where I'd endured thousands of meals and countless passive-aggressive comments. My sister, Miranda, had called a family meeting, supposedly to plan Grandma Edith's 80th birthday. But deep down, I knew something felt off. And then it hit me. This wasn't about Grandma. This was an intervention, and it was aimed squarely at me. My mom, Claudia, set down her wine glass with this dramatic, almost theatrical flourish. "Vivian," she began, her voice dripping with artificial concern, "we need to talk about something serious." I should have known right then and there. Miranda's husband, Quentin, was actually present. He usually vanished for family dinners, but there he sat, next to my sister, that signature smug look plastered all over his face, a look I'd grown to absolutely despise over their 6 years of marriage. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to sound confused, though a knot was already forming in my stomach. Then my dad, Raymond, cleared his throat. My dad never spoke first. That was always Mom's job, the self-appointed queen of our family. But tonight, he took the lead. And the first words out of his mouth? They hit me like a punch. "You're the reason this family has problems." Those words just hung there, heavy and suffocating, like old cigarette smoke. I scanned the faces around the table. Miranda gave a slow, deliberate nod, her perfectly manicured nails tapping a silent rhythm against her water glass. Quentin's smirk just widened. Even Aunt Sylvia, who I hadn't even known was coming to this ambush, pursed her lips in agreement. My mother, of course, picked up where my father left off, her voice softening into a fake sympathy. "We've been patient, sweetheart. We've tried to be supportive. But your attitude, your choices, your constant need to be different from everyone else in this family, it's just exhausting. You create tension wherever you go. Miranda's children pick up on it. Your grandmother notices it. We all do." I just sat there, trying to process. Every fiber of my being wanted to scream, to defend myself, to expose all the ways they'd made me feel like an outsider since childhood. But instead, something else happened. Something totally unexpected. I just nodded. "You're right," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I've been the problem." The sheer shock on their faces? It was almost worth the humiliation I felt. They'd braced for a fight, for tears, for accusations, maybe even a dramatic exit. What they got was compliance. "I'll do better," I added, forcing the words out. "I promise." You could almost hear the air whoosh out of the room. The tension completely deflated. Miranda actually smiled at me, a genuine smile I hadn't seen directed my way in years. My mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Even Dad looked relieved. Oh, they had no idea. My agreement wasn't surrender. It was a cold, hard strategy. But to really get it, to understand how I got to that point, I need to rewind. The dynamic between my parents and me had been utterly broken long before that wretched dinner. When I was 11, Miranda was 14, and already being groomed for the debutante ball, something my mother considered absolutely essential for proper social development. Mom spent every weekend ferrying Miranda to etiquette classes, endless dress fittings, and practice sessions with other girls from appropriate families. When it was supposed to be my turn, 3 years later, nobody even bothered to ask if I wanted to participate. Claudia just announced, with a wave of her hand, that the tradition wasn't suited to my personality. My father, Raymond, backed her up, as he always did. He was essentially Claudia's echo chamber, validating her every opinion with nods and the occasional verbal affirmation, never once offering an independent thought. The closest he ever came to defending me was silence, a refusal to pile on, but also a refusal to intervene. In a household where Mom's word was law, his neutrality was just another form of complicity. School offered no escape either. Miranda went to the same private academy, just 2 grades ahead, casting a shadow I could never outrun. Teachers openly compared us. "Your sister was such a joy to have in class," they'd say, the implication hanging heavy in the air. I was not. I was adequate at best, disappointing at worst, constantly measured against a standard I never asked to compete with. College offered a brief, glorious reprieve. Miranda chose a university 3 states away, and suddenly, I could breathe. I threw myself into academics, discovered a hidden talent for logistics and systems management, and graduated with honors. My parents acknowledged it with a generic card and a modest check. When Miranda graduated, though, they threw a party for 70 guests, complete with a live band. My first job out of college was administrative work at a commercial real estate firm. Boring, yes, unglamorous, absolutely, but it was educational. I learned the property ownership business from the ground up: leases, maintenance, tenant relations, regulatory compliance. Within 2 years, I'd moved to a residential property management company that actually offered advancement. Within 5, I was supervising a team of 8. Within 8, I had regional director status and a salary that would have absolutely shocked my parents if they'd ever bothered to ask. They never did. Our family conversations revolved entirely around Miranda's life, her wedding plans, her home renovations, her children's milestones. When attention occasionally, fleetingly, turned to me, the questions were always superficial, quickly abandoned. "Still working at that apartment place?" Claudia would ask, her eyes already drifting past me to something she found more interesting. I truly did grow up in my older sister's shadow, which isn't unusual, I know. Plenty of younger siblings navigate the challenge of following a high-achieving firstborn. But Miranda wasn't just accomplished, she was perfect in every way that mattered to our parents. She was beautiful where I was plain, graceful where I was awkward, charming where I was quiet. She excelled at the things Claudia and Raymond valued: social climbing, maintaining appearances, marrying well. When Miranda brought Quentin home during her junior year of college, my parents practically wept with joy. The Reynolds family owned a moderately successful real estate development company. Quentin stood to inherit a comfortable position, if not outright wealth. More importantly, he came from good people, which in my parents' vocabulary meant white-collar, country club adjacent, and appropriately ambitious. My own romantic choices never measured up. The artist I dated in my early 20s horrified my mother. The nonprofit administrator I got serious with in my mid-20s simply bored her. When I eventually excluded me, the inside jokes I wasn't part of stopped bringing anyone around at all. They took it as further evidence of my fundamental defectiveness. Professionally, I carved out a niche for myself that my family found equal parts mystifying and embarrassing. While Miranda married into real estate money and occupied herself with charity luncheons and interior decorating, I built a career in property management. Specifically, I managed residential rental properties across 3 states for a private investment firm. It wasn't glamorous work, but I'd proven myself reliable and efficient. Over 8 years, I'd risen from assistant property manager to regional director, overseeing a portfolio worth roughly $40 million. My family never quite understood what I did. They knew it involved apartments and tenants and occasionally required me to miss holiday gatherings for emergencies. Claudia would introduce me at social functions as working in real estate, which technically wasn't wrong, but implied something far more prestigious than the reality. What nobody in my family knew, what I deliberately kept hidden for 3 years, was that their house sat in my portfolio. The story of how that happened requires another step backward. My parents purchased their current home in 2019, downsizing from the 4-bedroom colonial where Miranda and I grew up. They'd been renting in a transitional condo while searching for the perfect forever home when they discovered a charming 3-bedroom craftsman in the Oak Ridge Heights neighborhood. The house had character, a renovated kitchen, and a price point just slightly outside their budget. What my parents didn't realize was that the motivated seller they negotiated with was actually a property management company handling the sale for an out-of-state investor. That investor, feeling the weight of long-distance landlord responsibilities, eventually sold the property to my firm instead of to my parents. My company then offered the house as a rental while quietly raising the down payment requirements beyond what Claudia and Raymond could afford. My parents became tenants in what they believed would be their retirement home. The rent was reasonable, the lease term standard, and they'd been assured they'd have first right of refusal if the property ever went back on the market. They had no reason to dig deeper into who actually owned the walls around them. 2 years after my parents signed their lease, I received a promotion. My new responsibilities included direct oversight of the Northwest region, which contained exactly one property in Oak Ridge Heights. I recognized the address immediately. Professional ethics dictated I disclose the conflict of interest to my superiors. But personal curiosity, mixed with something darker, screamed louder. I said nothing. The discovery felt like finding a loaded weapon in my desk drawer. I had no immediate intention of using it. But knowing it existed, that it was there, changed something fundamental about how I moved through family interactions. When Claudia made cutting remarks about my life choices, I'd think about the lease renewal sitting in my system. When Raymond praised Miranda's latest accomplishment without acknowledging anything I'd done, I'd picture the maintenance request queue I controlled. The power was theoretical, abstract, a comfort object I never expected to actually deploy. That all changed after the intervention dinner. Driving home that night, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. The humiliation sat heavy in my chest, compounded by my own cowardly agreement. I'd nodded along while they dissected my character. I'd promised to improve, to be less problematic, to conform more closely to their expectations. The familiar pattern of my entire childhood played out in miniature. Miranda golden, me tarnished. Everyone aligned in their assessment of who deserved praise and who deserved correction. Somewhere around mile marker 47, the trembling stopped. The humiliation hardened into something colder, more purposeful. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, I'd made a decision. I wouldn't fight them. Fighting had never worked. Instead, I'd demonstrate exactly how problematic I could be when I actually tried. For 12 months, I managed my parents' housing from behind a corporate veil. Every rent check they wrote passed through my department. Every maintenance request crossed my desk. I never abused this power. I approved their reasonable requests, ensured prompt repairs, even advocated internally for keeping their rent increases modest. If anything, they received better service than they would have from a stranger. During this period, I observed my family with newfound detachment. Holiday gatherings became research opportunities. I cataloged the ways the vacation plans made without consulting my schedule. The family group chat that somehow never included my number. Miranda hosted a birthday party for her son at a trampoline park and invited half the neighborhood. I learned about it from Aunt Sylvia 3 days after the fact. When I confronted Miranda about the oversight, she laughed it off. "Oh, it was just a kid's thing. I didn't think you'd want to come anyway. You've never seemed that interested in the children." The accusation stung, because it contained a grain of truth. I wasn't particularly close to my nephew and niece, Garrett and Sienna. But my distance wasn't disinterest. It was self-protection. Every time I tried to build a relationship with them, Miranda or Quentin would interrupt, redirect, find some reason to shuttle the children elsewhere. They treated me like a vaguely embarrassing relative, best kept at arm's length, and the children absorbed that message without understanding its source. Claudia made matters worse by constantly comparing my interactions with the kids to Miranda's maternal warmth. "You could learn something from your sister," she'd say after Miranda performed some display of affection. "Children need to feel loved, not analyzed." As if I'd been conducting experiments instead of simply asking Garrett about his favorite video games. The night of the family intervention, driving home alone after promising to do better, I finally understood how I might use my position for something other than silent stewardship. The weeks following that dinner felt like inhabiting someone else's life. I attended family functions with forced cheerfulness. I complimented Miranda's children, agreed with Claudia's opinions, and laughed at Raymond's stale jokes. I transformed myself into the daughter they'd always wanted, and they ate it up with spoons. Meanwhile, I documented everything. My family's criticism of me stretched back further than that single dinner. I pulled up old text messages where Claudia called me exhausting. I found emails from Miranda explaining why I wasn't invited to certain events, because my energy would ruin them. I compiled the mental archive of every slight, every exclusion, every time I'd been blamed for problems I hadn't caused. One evening, I sat cross-legged on my living room floor, surrounded by printed emails and photographs, constructing a timeline of family grievances. The exercise was meant to fuel my anger, to keep the fire burning when doubt threatened to extinguish it. Instead, I found myself crying over a photo from my high school graduation. Me standing slightly apart from the family cluster. Claudia's hand on Miranda's shoulder. Raymond looking somewhere off camera. Nobody touching me. I dried my tears and kept working. The documentation revealed patterns I'd felt but never articulated. Miranda's transgressions were always forgiven, explained away, reframed as understandable given circumstances. The time she crashed Raymond's car during college? She was stressed about finals. Her maxed-out credit card that my parents quietly paid off. Young people make mistakes. Her first marriage, which lasted 11 months and ended in a divorce nobody discussed. Incompatible personalities, not her fault. My own mistakes received no such generous interpretation. A B- on a report card meant I wasn't applying myself. A broken vase during childhood meant I was careless and destructive. My decision to major in business administration instead of something creative like Miranda's art history degree meant I lacked imagination and depth. The double standard extended to our adult lives. When Miranda quit her part-time gallery job to become a full-time homemaker, Claudia praised her dedication to family. When I worked 60-hour weeks climbing the corporate ladder, the same mother wondered aloud why I couldn't find better work-life balance. Miranda's choice to stop working was strength. My choice to keep working was dysfunction. I added these observations to my documentation, building a case file for a trial only I would ever conduct. The birthday party for Grandma Edith became my masterpiece of performance. I arrived early to help set up. I coordinated with the caterers. I made sure every guest had a drink and every gift was properly logged. By the end of the evening, even Aunt Sylvia admitted I'd been surprisingly helpful. At the party, Grandma Edith pulled me aside. At 80 years old now, she remained the sharpest mind in the family, though age had gentled her once formidable presence. "You're playing a game with them," she said quietly. I recognize the look. "Your grandfather had it sometimes." "I don't know what you mean, Grandma." She patted my hand. "I'm not judging, sweetheart. This family has never been kind to people who don't fit the mold. Just be careful. Games have a way of getting out of control." I assured her I was simply trying to improve family relationships. She smiled like she knew I was lying, but respected my right to do so. Spring arrived, and with it came lease renewal season. My parents' 3-year lease was expiring in July. Standard procedure meant sending renewal paperwork 90 days in advance, which would land in early April. I took a personal day on April 3rd and drove to a coffee shop 40 miles from my office. There, using my work laptop and VPN, I accessed my parents' file. The property had appreciated significantly since they'd moved in. Market rate rent for comparable homes in Oak Ridge Heights had jumped nearly 30%. Corporate policy encouraged bringing long-term tenants up to market rate during renewals. I didn't alter my parents' renewal terms. I simply let policy do its work. The new monthly rent figure that appeared on their renewal notice represented an increase of $718. Not illegal, not even unusual in the current market, but for retirees living on a fixed income, it was devastating. Claudia called me 3 days after receiving the notice, her voice trembling with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Vivian, you work in property management. Can you explain this? Is this normal?" "Unfortunately, yes," I said, keeping my tone sympathetic and professional. "The rental market has been brutal. Landlords everywhere are raising rates to match property values. Have you tried negotiating?" "Your father sent an email to the management company. They said the rate was firm." Because I'd made sure to flag their account as non-negotiable, citing a fictional internal policy about properties in high-demand neighborhoods. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I wish there was something I could do." She thanked me for listening and hung up. I felt nothing. Over the following weeks, I watched my family scramble. Raymond and Claudia couldn't afford the new rent on their retirement income. Miranda offered to help, but her own finances were tighter than she let on. Quentin's family money had largely evaporated in a series of bad investments. The real estate development company he stood to inherit had been quietly sold off in pieces 2 years prior. My parents explored their options. They couldn't buy. Their credit wasn't strong enough for a mortgage after some medical bills had gone to collections a couple of years earlier. They couldn't easily find another rental. The same market conditions driving their current increase affected every property in their price range. Moving to a cheaper area meant leaving behind their social network, their church, their entire carefully constructed lives. In June, Miranda organized another family meeting. This time, the purpose was brainstorming solutions to our parents' housing crisis. What if they moved in with you? Quentin suggested to Miranda, clearly hoping she'd refuse. We don't have the space, Miranda said quickly. The kids each need their own rooms, and my home office is non-negotiable. Everyone looked at me. I have a one-bedroom apartment, I said. The couch pulls out, but it's not a long-term solution. Claudia actually teared up. We never should have sold the Colonial. We had equity there. We had stability. Raymond put his arm around her. We'll figure something out. We always do. But they didn't figure it out. July 1st arrived with my parents still in their Craftsman house, still paying rent they couldn't afford, still hemorrhaging savings they'd need for actual retirement. In August, I made my second move. One of my responsibilities as regional director was conducting routine property inspections. Most landlords required annual walkthroughs to assess wear and tear, ensure lease compliance, and identify maintenance issues. These inspections were typically scheduled with reasonable notice and conducted with professional courtesy. I scheduled my parents' inspection for August 15th, giving them the legally required 72 hours notice. The letter came from the management company, not from me personally. Still, it shook them. We've never had an inspection before, Claudia told me over the phone. What are they looking for? Are we in trouble? It's standard, I assured her. Just make sure the smoke detectors work and the place is reasonably tidy. Nothing to worry about. The guilt I expected to feel hadn't materialized yet. My conscience operated on a delay, absorbing each action without immediate reaction, storing the moral weight for later processing. In the moment, executing my plan felt clinical, almost boring. I was simply doing my job with a particular property, following procedures that applied to thousands of tenants across my portfolio. That I knew these particular tenants intimately seemed almost incidental. On inspection day, I sent a junior colleague named Derek to conduct the walkthrough. I'd specifically chosen Derek because he didn't know my family connection, and because he had a reputation for being thorough to the point of irritating. Derek's report landed on my desk 3 days later. He noted several minor issues: a bathroom faucet with a slow drip, some wear on the carpet in high-traffic areas, a small crack in one window seal. Nothing requiring immediate action. Nothing justifying penalties. But the report also noted that my parents had made unauthorized modifications to the property. Specifically, they'd installed a garden shed in the backyard, a modest 8x10 structure where Raymond kept his tools, without seeking written approval from the property management company. In most circumstances, this kind of violation resulted in a form letter requiring removal of the structure, or a retroactive approval application. Nothing severe, nothing urgent. I escalated it. My reasoning, documented carefully in internal communications, centered on liability concerns. The shed hadn't been professionally installed. We had no record of its construction materials or foundation. If it collapsed and injured someone, the property owner could face legal exposure. Better to address the issue formally than risk future complications. The letter my parents received gave them 30 days to remove the shed or face lease violation proceedings. Raymond called me in a panic. They're saying we violated our lease over a garden shed I built with my own 2 hands. We could lose our home, Vivian. His voice cracked on the word home, and something shifted in my chest. My father wasn't a demonstrative man. Hearing him this close to tears should have stopped me cold. It didn't. The armor I built around my intentions held firm. Let me look into it, I said. Maybe I can find someone at the company who can help. For 2 weeks, I looked into it. I made calls that went nowhere. I sent emails that were ignored. I represented myself to my parents as their advocate while ensuring every possible avenue of resolution remained closed. The performance required constant attention to detail. I had to seem genuinely frustrated by the bureaucratic obstacles I directed. I practiced my tone in the bathroom mirror before update calls, making sure my voice conveyed the right mixture of effort and futility. When Claudia thanked me for trying so hard, I accepted her gratitude with what I hoped looked like weary determination. Late at night, alone in my apartment, the magnitude of my deception sometimes overwhelmed me. I'd lie awake calculating the stress I was causing, imagining my father's blood pressure, my mother's sleepless nights. These thoughts didn't translate to action. Remorse existed in one compartment of my mind. The plan continued executing from another. Finally, Raymond dismantled the shed himself. It took him a weekend of work that clearly taxed his 72-year-old body. Claudia sent me photos of the empty patch of dirt where it had stood. "Your father's heartbroken," she said. "He loved that shed. It was his space." The pattern continued through fall. A new policy limited overnight guests to 7 consecutive days, disrupting my parents' plans to host Aunt Sylvia during her post-surgery recovery. A modification to the landscaping agreement required them to maintain the yard to professional standards, easy for younger tenants, challenging for seniors with limited mobility. Every change was legal, defensible, and crushing. By November, my parents' savings had dwindled significantly. They'd reduced their food budget, canceled subscriptions, postponed Raymond's dental work. The stress showed in their faces, their postures, their increasingly desperate phone calls to me, seeking advice I had no intention of giving honestly. I began noticing physical changes during my visits. Claudia's silver hair, once meticulously styled at a salon every 6 weeks, showed darker roots she couldn't afford to address. Raymond's wardrobe, never fashionable but always neat, displayed the wear of clothes washed too many times without replacement. The house itself, still technically maintained to lease standards, took on a slightly neglected quality. Small repairs deferred, decorations thinned as items were quietly sold. One afternoon, I stopped by unannounced and found my mother clipping coupons at the kitchen table. Stacks of newspaper circulars surrounded her, organized by store and expiration date. She looked up with embarrassment when I walked in. "Just planning the grocery trip," she said, as if coupon clipping required explanation. I helped her sort for an hour. We didn't talk about why this had become necessary. We didn't talk about the rent increase or the shed or the endless stream of policy changes making their lives harder. We talked about brands we liked, stores with the best deals, whether generic medications worked as well as name brand. Normal mother-daughter conversation, stripped of pretense. For that hour, I almost forgot what I was doing to her. Thanksgiving arrived, and with it, another family gathering. We met at Miranda's house this time. My parents no longer felt comfortable hosting, ashamed of their newly constrained circumstances. The meal was subdued. Gone was the smug confidence that had characterized family dinners since that intervention 18 months prior. Miranda looked tired. Quentin looked defeated. My parents looked old in a way that had nothing to do with actual age. After dessert, Raymond stood to make a toast. His hands shook slightly as he raised his glass. "I want to thank everyone for being here," he said. "This has been a difficult year. Claudia and I have faced some challenges we never expected, but family is what matters. Family is what endures." He looked directly at me. "Vivian, I want to apologize." The table went silent. "Last year at dinner, we said some things that weren't fair. We blamed you for problems that weren't your fault. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, watching everything fall apart around us, and I realized that we were wrong. You've been the one person trying to help us through this housing nightmare. You've answered every panicked phone call. You've researched options we wouldn't have found on our own. You've been a good daughter, and we haven't always been good parents to you." Claudia nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "We're sorry, sweetheart." For a moment, just one brief, flickering moment, I considered stopping. The apology was genuine. My parents were suffering, and I caused that suffering. Whatever satisfaction I'd expected from watching their lives crumble tasted metallic and strange on my tongue. The table waited for my response. Miranda's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Quentin looked uncomfortable, out of his depth in a moment of authentic family emotion. Even Aunt Sylvia, who had been complicit in my original condemnation, nodded encouragingly. A dozen possible futures branched from this moment. I could confess everything, throw myself on their mercy, spend years rebuilding trust one deliberately destroyed. I could continue my campaign, pushing forward until my parents had nothing left. I could walk away entirely, relocate to a different city, let the whole mess resolve without my further involvement. But I remembered every Christmas where Miranda's gifts outshone mine. I remembered every family photo where I was positioned at the edge, an afterthought. I remembered the dinner where they told me I was the problem while everyone nodded in agreement. I smiled warmly and accepted their apology. The moment passed. Dinner continued. Dessert was served. A pumpkin pie Miranda had ordered from a bakery, presented as if she'd made it herself. Nobody corrected her claim. I ate my slice and made appreciative noises, playing the role of reconciled daughter with practiced ease. December brought the final blow. Property tax assessments in our county had risen sharply, reflecting the same market appreciation that justified rental increases. My company's ownership group decided to sell several properties in the Northwest region, including the Craftsman in Oak Ridge Heights. My parents' home would go on the market in January. Standard procedure required notifying tenants of an impending sale. It also required honoring existing lease terms. Tenants couldn't simply be evicted because a property changed hands. My parents' current lease ran through June. They had time. What they didn't have was money. Purchasing the home required a down payment and mortgage qualification they couldn't achieve. Staying as tenants meant eventually facing whatever terms a new owner might impose. Leaving meant starting over in a rental market that had only grown more brutal. I drafted the sale notification letter myself. I chose the language carefully, making it sound both sympathetic and final. The letter went out on December 10th. Claudia called me sobbing. "They're selling our house, Vivian. After everything we've been through, after all the increases and the inspections and the rules, now they're just selling it out from under us." "I'm so sorry, Mom." The words came easily now. "Can't you do anything? You work for a property management company. Don't you have connections? Isn't there someone who can help?" "I've tried, Mom. I've done everything I can." Christmas was quiet that year. My parents gave token gifts they clearly couldn't afford. Miranda brought a ham she bought on sale. Even the children seemed subdued, picking up on the tension that had become our family's permanent atmosphere. On December 27th, Grandma Edith called me privately. Her voice was steady despite her age. "You did this," she said. "No accusation, just a statement of fact." "Did what, Grandma?" "The housing problems, the inspections, the shed, all of it. You work for the company that owns their house, don't you?" I didn't answer. "I told you games get out of control. Your parents are talking about moving to that retirement community in Montana, the cheap one. Your grandfather," and I looked at places like that before he died. "They're where dreams go to wither. They blame me for everything wrong with this family. They were wrong. But being wrong doesn't make wrong right. You don't understand what it's like being the scapegoat." "I understand perfectly. My own mother favored my brother until the day she died. I could have destroyed him a dozen times over. I had opportunities, believe me. I chose not to take them. Some prices are too high, even for justice." I hung up without saying goodbye. January arrived, and with it, the listing of my parents' home. The asking price reflected current market conditions, well beyond what Raymond and Claudia could afford, well beyond what most middle-class families in the area could manage. Open houses drew young professional couples, investors, speculators. My parents smiled awkwardly at strangers touring their living room. The house sold in February to a software engineer relocating from California. The new owner wanted possession by April, 3 months before my parents' lease expired in July. She offered a buyout for $1,000 to vacate early. My parents took the money. They had no choice. In March, they moved. Not to Miranda's house. She still didn't have room. Not to mine. My one-bedroom suddenly felt like an inadequate excuse. They rented a small apartment in a less desirable neighborhood 30 minutes away. The complex had thin walls, limited parking, and a persistent smell of mildew in the hallways. Moving day arrived, gray and drizzling weather that matched the occasion's somber mood. A rented truck sat in the driveway of the Craftsman house, its back doors yawning open to receive a lifetime of accumulated possessions. Raymond directed operations with forced cheerfulness, pointing movers toward boxes labeled in Claudia's careful handwriting. I helped them move, carried boxes, assembled furniture, pretended this wasn't exactly what I'd engineered. The new apartment occupied the second floor of a building constructed in the 1970s and minimally maintained since. Carpets bore stains from previous tenants. Windows faced a parking lot where bass-heavy music thumped from passing cars at all hours. The kitchen featured appliances that functioned but inspired no confidence, their surfaces yellowed by decades of use. Claudia tried to put a positive spin on the situation. "It's cozy," she said, surveying the living room that couldn't quite accommodate all their furniture, and temporary. "We'll find something better once we get back on our feet." Raymond said nothing. He stood at the window looking out at the parking lot, his shoulders slumped in a posture I'd never seen from him before. My father had always carried himself with quiet dignity, a man comfortable in his place in the world. That man seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone smaller, older, defeated. My father thanked me for being there. My mother hugged me and said I was the only one they could count on. The satisfaction I'd expected never came. What came instead was a phone call from Derek, my junior colleague, in April. "Hey, I was cleaning out old files and found something weird." He said that property in Oak Ridge Heights, the one with the garden shed violation, the tenant's last name was the same as yours, and their emergency contact was listed as Vivian, phone number ending in your extension. I felt my stomach drop. Coincidence? Common name. Maybe, he said, but I also noticed you flagged their account as non-negotiable during renewal season, and you personally escalated the shed issue, and you drafted the sale notification letter instead of letting the admin team handle it. What are you suggesting? Nothing. Just found it interesting. He hung up. I spent the rest of the day waiting for a call from HR that never came. Derek apparently kept his observations to himself, but his words echoed in my mind for weeks. He'd seen the pattern. Others might too. My careful game had left traces I hadn't anticipated. Mother's Day fell on a rainy Sunday. I visited my parents' new apartment with flowers and a card. The place felt cramped, dim, wrong. Raymond sat in a recliner watching television with the volume too loud. Claudia made tea in a kitchen barely big enough for one person. We talked about nothing important. The weather, a show Miranda's kids were watching. Grandma Edith's declining health. Normal family conversation, stripped of the pretension that used to fill our gatherings. "I miss the house," Claudia admitted eventually. "I miss my garden. I miss having space to breathe." "I know, Mom. Sometimes I wonder if we did something to deserve this. If God was punishing us for something." "You didn't deserve this," I said. The words felt hollow because I knew the truth. They hadn't deserved this. Not entirely. They'd been thoughtless, cruel in the casual way families often are, willing to make me their scapegoat. But they hadn't deserved to lose their home, their security, their peace. I had made myself the problem they accused me of being. And in solving my own pain, I'd created wounds that wouldn't heal. The drive home took longer than usual because I pulled over twice, unable to see the road through my tears. In June, I submitted my resignation from the property management company. My supervisor seemed surprised, but didn't ask too many questions. I cited burnout, which wasn't entirely a lie. I spent the summer job hunting, processing, trying to understand who I'd become. The righteous anger that had fueled my campaign against my parents had burned out, leaving only ash and regret.